A few months ago, someone sent me their portfolio screenshot. They had 43 different positions, individual stocks, sector ETFs, leveraged funds, 3 different S&P 500 ETFs doing basically the same thing. They'd been adding stuff for years, every time a new trend caught their attention. Their 10-year return? Around 11% annually. The person they were benchmarking against had 3 ETFs. That's it. 3, and they'd averaged over 15% over the same decade. More positions, more decisions, more stress, and worse results. That's the part nobody really talks about. Complexity almost never wins. But simplicity isn't the same thing as being passive or lazy. There's a real deliberate logic to what you own and why. So today, I want to walk you through the 3 ETFs I'd choose if I could only pick 3 going into 2026. Not because they're trending, not because someone on social media told me to, but because there's a coherent case for each one, and together they cover something most portfolios quietly miss. Here's the framework. Think of it as 3 layers. Layer 1 is growth, owning the companies that have been driving the majority of market returns for the past decade and are likely to keep doing so. Layer 2 is breadth, making sure you're not entirely dependent on 10 stocks to carry your entire portfolio. Layer 3 is genuine diversification, not just owning the same US companies through different wrappers, but actually different economies with different cycles. And we're going to look at real numbers throughout, what these funds have actually returned over 10 years, what $10,000 actually becomes, and more importantly, why each one belongs in the same portfolio together. Not just that it performed well, why the combination makes sense. Here's what most people actually do when they start investing. They buy a couple of stocks they've heard about, some Apple, maybe some Tesla. They add a fund or two, probably ones they saw recommended in an article, and every few months when something new gets hot, they add a little of that too. Over time, they end up with a portfolio that's half the S&P 500 and half a collection of things they were excited about at different moments. There's no system, no intentional architecture. And when markets get rough, which they do reliably every few years, they don't know what to hold, what to sell, or why any of it is there in the first place. The quiet cost of that confusion is behavioral. People panic sell at the wrong time, or freeze, or just stop looking at their accounts because it feels too overwhelming. The data on this is pretty consistent. Most retail investors underperform a simple index approach over any meaningful time frame, not because the market is unbeatable, but because behavior is really hard to manage when your portfolio doesn't have a clear logic behind it. 3 well-chosen ETFs give you that logic. That's what we're building here. Let me push back on something a lot of people believe. If you own VOO, SPY, VTI, and QQQ, you probably feel diversified. 4 funds, 4 tickers. But if you actually look at the holdings, you're seeing the same 6 companies: NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Broadcom, dominating the weight across all of them. That's not diversification. That's concentration with extra steps and extra fees. Real diversification means your portfolio has exposure to things that don't all move in lockstep. And for most US-heavy investors, one thing is consistently missing: the rest of the world. In 2025, international developed markets outside the US returned over 31% for the full year. They outperformed US large-cap growth, and investors with 0 international exposure missed all of it after years of being told international stocks just don't perform. I'm not saying go heavily international, but the case for a thoughtful global allocation is stronger than most people give it credit for, and we'll get into the specifics shortly. First, ETF number 1. ETF 1 is SCHG, Schwab US Large-Cap Growth ETF. This fund tracks the Dow Jones US Large-Cap Growth Total Stock Market Index. In plain terms, it owns about 197 companies classified as high-growth large caps, technology leaders, platform companies, businesses where the market is pricing in future expansion, not just current earnings. As of June 2026, the top 3 holdings are NVIDIA at roughly 11.6% of the fund, Apple at about 9.9%, and Microsoft Microsoft at around 7%. The top 10 holdings together represent about 59% of the entire fund. Information technology makes up roughly 48% of the total portfolio. That concentration is intentional, not accidental, and it's worth understanding rather than glossing over. We'll come back to it. Now, the performance. Over the past 10 years, SCHG has averaged approximately 18.6% annually with dividends reinvested. A $10,000 investment in 2016 would be worth around $55,000 today. That's not a typo. If instead you started with $10,000 and added $500 every month, you'd be looking at well over $200,000 over that same decade. Steady, boring contributions to a high-growth index. That's what compounding looks like in practice. The expense ratio is 0.04%. For every $10,000 invested, you're paying $4 per year in fees. It's essentially free to own. Now, SCHG isn't the only fund in this lane. Invesco's QQQ is the more famous name. It now has around $490 billion in assets. Vanguard's VUG has grown so fast, it recently surpassed QQQ in total assets. All three track similar growth-oriented indexes and have performed well. SCHG is smaller at around $55 to $60 billion, but its 10-year track record and near-zero cost make it hard to dismiss. One more note, SCHG has a very low dividend yield, around 0.35 to 0.38%. That's actually useful in a taxable account because it limits tax drag from distributions you didn't ask for. And the dividends it does pay out are almost entirely qualified, taxed at the lower long-term capital gains rate. ETF 2 is VTI, Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF. If SCHG is the engine, VTI is the chassis. It doesn't try to pick winners. It owns everything. Over 3,500 publicly traded U.S. companies across large, mid, small, and micro-cap, spread across both growth and value styles. VTI is one of the largest funds in the world, with over $660 billion in assets. That scale matters. It means essentially zero liquidity risk and rock-bottom operational costs. Because of how market cap weighting works, VTI's top holdings look familiar. Nvidia, Apple, and Microsoft are still in the top three, but they carry less weight here, around 6 to 7% each, rather than SCHG's 8 to 12%. Technology is still about 30 to 35% of the fund, but you also get meaningful exposure to healthcare, financials, industrials, energy, and consumer staples, sectors SCHG barely touches. Over the past 10 years, VTI has averaged approximately 15% annually with dividends reinvested. A $10,000 investment made in 2016 would be worth around $40,000 today. The expense ratio is 0.03%. Dividend yield is around 1.0%, and the vast majority of those dividends are qualified. So why own both VTI and SCHG instead of just putting everything into SCHG? Because SCHG is directionally concentrated. When growth stocks correct, and concentrated sectors do correct sharply, as they did in 2022 when SCHG fell over 31%, VTI's broader base acts as a stabilizer. It's a deliberate portfolio balance, not a redundant holding. ETF 3 is VEA, the Vanguard FTSE Developed Markets ETF. VEA tracks the FTSE Developed All-Cap ex-US Index, which means it covers developed international markets outside the United States, primarily Europe, Japan, the UK, Canada, and Australia. It holds approximately 3,957 stocks. Current AUM is over $220 billion, making it one of the largest international ETFs in the world. The top holdings look different from anything in SCHG or VTI. ASML, the Dutch semiconductor equipment company that supplies chip makers globally, sits at the top. Samsung is near the top too. These are massive, globally significant businesses that simply don't show up in a US-only portfolio. Europe makes up over 50% of the fund, with the Pacific region and North America, Canada, accounting for much of the rest. The 10-year annualized return for VEA is approximately 9.5 to 10.2%, depending on the measurement period. That's lower than VTI and meaningfully lower than SCHG. That's the honest truth, and it's worth understanding why it still belongs. First, currency diversification. When the US dollar weakens, which it does in cycles, international holdings gain value relative to a dollar-denominated portfolio. It's a passive hedge most people never think about. Second, valuation. As of 2026, international developed market stocks are trading at materially lower price-to-earnings multiples than their US counterparts. That doesn't guarantee outperformance next year, but starting valuation has historically mattered over long periods. Third, correlation. VEA doesn't move in lockstep with SCHG or VTI. That's the actual definition of diversification, assets that behave differently from each other. Expense ratio, 0.03%. Dividend yield, approximately 2.7 to 2.9%, with around 72% of those dividends qualifying for the lower tax rate. One alternative worth mentioning, VXUS from Vanguard adds emerging markets exposure, over 8,000 stocks total. It's broader but slightly less tax efficient and has historically generated slightly lower returns than VEA. If you specifically want emerging markets exposure, VXUS is the right tool. If you want developed international with cleaner tax treatment, VEA is the tighter choice. Portfolio examples. Now let's look at how these three actually fit together, because allocation matters as much as fund selection. These are illustrative historical examples, not predictions. Portfolio A, equal thirds, 33% SCHG, 33% VTI, 33% VEA. Over 10 years, this blended portfolio would have averaged roughly 14% annually, slightly below the pure S&P 500, primarily due to the international drag during the 2015 to 2024 decade of US dominance. But it's a much smoother ride, and the 2025 international surge would have been a meaningful tailwind. Portfolio B, moderate growth tilt, 40% SCHG, 40% VTI, 20% VEA. Closer to 15% annualized historically, a modest outperformance of the S&P 500 with less concentration risk than going all in on SCHG. Portfolio C, aggressive growth, 60% SCHG, 30% VTI, 10% VEA. Historically, this approaches 16 to 16.5% annualized. It meaningfully outperforms the S&P 500 over a 10-year window, but you need to be comfortable with the volatility. In 2022, a portfolio this growth-heavy would have dropped roughly 25 to 28%. That's the price of the return, not a flaw in the strategy. The question is whether your timeline and psychology give you room to hold through it. Simple portfolios make that easier. When you understand why everything is there, you're less likely to panic at the wrong moment, and staying invested through downturns is where the real long-term returns actually come from. If you're currently building something like this, or if you already have a portfolio and you're wondering how it stacks up, drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what allocations people are running going into the second half of 2026 and why.